All right, what's going on, guys? Today is March 1st, so this video will be for the week of March 2nd. We'll start by going over, I'll take a look at the economic calendar for next week. I'll take a look at some earnings I'm looking at for next week. And then I'll get into I'll go over a few ideas I have on the market just for the next, this week and maybe the next upcoming weeks as well. And then we'll get into some individual setups too. So I just want to start. Let's just get SPY up. We'll start with SPY and QQQ as always, but I do just want to start with economic data quick. Really nothing to focus on. Economic data hasn't really been a mover for the market. You should always know what's going on though. Eventually the market will be very data driven. You're looking at jobless claims Thursday. It should be at 8:30 release time. Same thing with non-farm payrolls on Friday. Those two I'm looking at should be, if you do get any sort of real volatile event, it would be off of those announcements and those numbers. Other than that, looking like a pretty quiet week for economic data. Earnings though, so let's start with Monday. If you are in my Discord and involved, even just with my Twitter or anything, ASTS is my largest holding that I have for my long-term portfolio, or my main account, you should say. So I will be heavily looking at, what ASTS says, not really their numbers, but what they say in their earnings call on Monday. And again, that is after hours on Monday, they report. You also have SATS reporting pre-market on Monday. So that's going to be another major, again, I'm not thinking they blow out reports, but in terms of the reaction, it's going to give you a clearer look on what's going to go on with this space theme and what could possibly happen. You do have MDB that also reports Monday after hours. You have SE, Target, Onan reporting pre-market on Tuesday. You have CrowdStrike after hours Tuesday. You have AVGO after hours Wednesday. That'll be big. You have CIEN, which is honestly a great trending energy stock right now. I'm going to look at how that one reacts. That's pre-market Thursday. You got Costco and Marvel after hours Thursday, and then nothing on Friday. So not too crazy of a week in terms of earnings. To me, this is the craziest week because it has ASTS, but we'll see how these reactions play out. But yeah, not a crazy economic week, not a crazy earnings week. Let's just take a peek at SPY and QQQ before I get into some other ideas. So just stuff to note. I like looking at SPY and QQQ because number one, you want to look at the trend. Is SPY under the 9, under the 50, under the 21? Is QQQ under the 9, 21, 50? If that's the case, that should be switching the sort of, trading style you're on. If we're trending over all those moving averages, I'm going to have a very bullish strategy oriented, playbook. If we're under all of them, I'm going to have my more, risk adverse playbook. So just stuff to note. So SPY already under the 9, under the 50, under the 21. Really nothing screaming long here. Especially with the Iran news over the weekend. You really want to see how this acts. If we do get that gap down, how aggressively do we get bought up? Do we not get bought up at all? The market's really not moved since, what is this, September, October. So there's really no momentum. So you can argue momentum's getting lost. You can argue we're just basing. There's multiple arguments. But point being, how we react off this Iran war news is probably going to be a big tell for where this market wants to go for the next could even be few months, to be honest. But SPY under moving averages. Let's just take a look and confirm QQQ. QQQ trying to reclaim the 9, but not really. So, already I know SPY and QQQ are under all moving averages for this week. That's already telling me, all right, take some trades quicker. If you do enter, don't look for home runs, smaller size, maybe even look for weekly trades and go smaller size so you can manage your risk a little better, with expecting 0 and stuff like that. But just something to note. Now my risk is a little more, understanded for this week. But yeah, just a few ideas before we get into some individual setups to go off of. So some news we had recently, SpaceX does plan to do their IPO, I believe, end of March or end of April. I forget what they said, maybe even end of May. I'm going to have to look into it. All we need to know is SpaceX is planning to IPO within the next few weeks or months. So what we should see here, a couple things. Does that bring attention to the space sector? It absolutely should. If SpaceX is going public, immediately people are going to start thinking, okay, how can I get exposed to this sort of thing? And it just brings a lot of popularity around it. When honestly, when anything's related to Elon Musk as well, you'll get that little extra, you know, I don't want to say meme crowd, but certainly gets a little more volatile when his name is said. So just another thing to note, more of a fundamental valuation perspective. They're valuing SpaceX at about $1.5 trillion. So, you know, if you're looking at how their revenue is broken down, I believe over 60% of their revenue is coming from Starlink. So that's, you know, that's already valuing Starlink at over $1 trillion. If you're valuing Starlink at over $1 trillion and you're valuing ASTS at $40 billion, I think it's less now, maybe even closer to 30. You know, valuation starts to get a little skewed there, you know, not in terms of, you can make the argument in terms of Starlink being overvalued, but I'm going to make the argument where ASTS is significantly undervalued. So just something to note, you know, ASTS has, I don't even know the exact numbers off the top of my head, probably over 500 million more MNO subscriber access to Starlink. The only difference really, it's a big difference, but Starlink has it implemented. They have the revenue. They have, you know, they have everything working already, where ASTS is still in that build out phase. And that's where that massive uncertainty comes from. But just watch for that real big re-rating. You know, it's a very big possibility. So just something to note with that SpaceX IPO, how to play it, you know, how to look for that theme, and if they get any love. Another note, so we do have S&P inclusion, which should be coming up, I believe, third Friday of this month. I don't know the exact date, but something to note with that. VRT, you know, VRT hits every single criteria for S&P inclusion in terms of, you know, their fundamental increase on their earnings and in terms of what their market cap is. You know, it's one of the bigger market cap names that have been performing really well that aren't in the S&P yet. So just something to note and look out for. But let's look at some individual setups now. So we have Amazon first. I'm going to go over Amazon and Palantir first. These two have the same exact setups, similar setups in mind. So Amazon, I'm looking at this pivot here, 211.42. You know, tested it after earnings, tried to break over it, couldn't, tried to break over it again, couldn't, gave you that flush to the downside. And then, you know, this is what I love, that little V pattern reversal. So all you need to see after the V pattern, how does it build that base, you know, on the right side of it for the next couple days. We got a really good tight right side base, held the 9 MA the whole time. You know, if Amazon cracks over 211.42, I'm looking at it. I'm not taking it yet. I'm looking at it. You still have, you know, 1, 2, arguably 3 fake outs over that 211.42. So just something to note. But ideally what we're looking for here, can it get over 211.42 and then can it back test and hold? You know, you figure every time it tried to back test when it got over, it just failed. That's what those daily candles are telling me. So if this can get over 211, you're looking at a good breakout retest entry, back off 211. You know, and aside from the fact that there's a really good target here, you have about $7 for target. The reason you wait for that breakout retest, it's going to give you a really, really clear stop. Let me just go down to like a smaller time frame. Just for example, you know, let's say you were taking it the other way. Let's say this went this way, right? And you were taking the rejection. If you enter here after this candle off that reversal, your stop loss is here. You have a clear defined risk, and then you can ride the trend. So let's apply that to if it happens on Amazon. Let's say this goes over. Let's say it goes over, right? Comes back down, maybe cracks under it a little bit, and then starts ripping back up. That stop loss here on that undercut of that 211 level, you have such a clear stop that your risk to reward is so defined. And honestly, if that's your pivot and you do get that follow through, that's when you can look at, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5x trades type of stuff. But it starts with how defined your risk is. And that's what that breakout retest entry will give you. Let's look at the same thing with Palantir. That's not Palantir. Pull that up. Oh, come on. There we go. Palantir's been chopping around. This one's been tough. This one's been getting knocked down with software, but I'm going to look at a couple things here. Number one, massive pivot point. Massive pivot point it's basing over. You know, and you have a base for what now? 226. Yeah, month. Over a month? Sorry, not a month. Half a month? Yeah. But yeah, just something to note. You also have multiple bases, you know, 1, 2, 3 supports, kind of like a triple bottom off that 128.51. But what I'm really looking at here, these moving averages have been acting really clear, you know, in terms of right here, you know, right here. You figure Palantir's been riding this downtrend under the 9, under the 21 the entire time. So what you're looking for is that little character change, you know, similar to this. Palantir riding under the 9 the whole time, finally breaks over the 9, but then doesn't sell off. Those are character changers. So right here, under the 9 for months, finally tries to break over the 9, fails immediately. Breaks over the 9 again. Now you have 3 days it's held over this 9MA. The other argument, it hasn't been over the 21 at all. The only thing I want to see on Palantir on this next day, can it bounce off 136 and hold? And if it does and closes over that 21, you can assume this is the area where that character change is going to come in. You know, where buyers are going to be stronger than sellers. You know, they tried, they had their great move. Now it could be time to switch up. So just something to note and look out for. You can look at that same breakout retest, or even if it just gives you the retest off 136.32 and gives you a clean hookup off of it, your stop is really defined. So just something to note. All right. But yeah, those two are, that Amazon and Palantir, very similar in terms of how they're set up. CLS, it's just an interesting one. You know, just something, when I'm staring at this chart, the first thing you notice, this whole area between 282 and 266, it just grabs liquidity every single time. Dipped into it, ripped. Dipped in, ripped. Dipped, bounced. Dipped, held. Held, held, held. One can only assume, you know, not only can you assume, your stop losses can get very defined when you use these levels here. So just for example, you know, if CLS reclaims 281, you can go long with stop losses running under either the green candle here, maybe the red candle here, maybe even 281 the second you get that first follow through. But this would be more of a swing, you know. Every single time it's in this area, you figure you're getting at least 3 or 4 days of upside. The only thing that's making this, you know, a trickier trade, and probably not an A+ trade if you're looking at this here, you are under the 9, you are under the 21, you are under the 50, and this last bounce here outside really wasn't as strong as the others. You know, it's chopped around in the past, but this is an interesting trade. I'm looking at this one as something I go, you know, maybe a week or two expiration, I take one contract and kind of leave it type of thing. Maybe I look at this 266 pivot as my stop loss, but I'm really looking if this can just give me that next liquidity grab outside of this range. But just something to note, you know, most people would be like, oh, it's back here, surely it doesn't do it again. It can do this, you know, the more times it's done this, the stronger it gets. You know, understand that with trends as well. So tougher trade in terms of structure, but just something to note. Maybe it's just something to watch, but I'll certainly be watching that for a lighter trade. TMDX. This is an interesting one, man, because it's a harder one to trade in terms of the liquidity that you're going to get in these options. But man, this setup. So, you know, first thing I'm looking at, they blew out their earnings report. This earnings has been accumulating fantastic. Actually, after ASTS, this is my biggest holding, TMDX. No, I'm not just saying this to get people to buy it either. I'm trying to get people focused on winners. So, you know, if I'm looking here, first of all, this base, phenomenal. Every A+ setup that has ever ripped is going to have a base like this. I can pull up APP really quick and just show the same thing when it was running. The same thing. Look, reminds me of exactly this. Exactly this. It's going to be a little choppier, but it's the same rhythm. So just stuff to note with TMDX. Number one, it is making significant money. Significant money. You know, their earnings are accelerating every single quarter. That's number one. Number two, They're an organ transplant company. They are the only one that does what they do. They are sitting in an untapped market. That's number 2. Number 3, the technical analysis is there. You have structure, you have tight bases, you have higher lows being made, and this big pivot point here, what I'm really looking at, this quarterly here, was previous resistance for, I don't even know, months, almost a year. Finally switched here, especially with this bar on Friday. Finally seems to be switching here. So I'm looking at anything off of this monthly here. If this gets over 144 and gives you that back test, this can start running towards that 160, 177 all-time highs. Again, how you play it is up to you. I think shares look great here. It did a 10-300 day. This looks phenomenal. Actually, I don't think it did, but it looks phenomenal just based off of earnings. Whether you play shares, whether you play leaps, whether you play a multi-week swing, I'm looking at this trending higher, over the course of the next few weeks. So just something to know. Amazon and Palantir, definitely just that better structured trade so far for, actual setups that are ready for tomorrow. Let's take a look at Lilly as well. Yeah, Lilly's just another one, like ridiculously tight pace. This isn't even a daily chart. This is a weekly chart. You have 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 12. You have 14 weeks of a 100-point range. So when you see stuff like that, that's not weakness, that's significant strength. Lilly ran from what? I believe it was 200 something. Yeah, 100 something to 1,000, and you get no sell off after that rip. This thing is waiting to move higher, not lower. So ideally the smartest trade here is waiting for that 11-14 pivot. You might get a run towards 1079 if this gets over the Friday's highs. But this pivot right here, this major pivot over that 9 MA, over that 21 MA through the monthly, it gives you that second half. It gives you this ability to start building that right side of the structure a little more clearly. The issue with this one is it's been trying to do that, 3-4 times, and it fails every single time. So ideally what I'm looking for, if you notice here, you don't really get any follow through. When it gets over 1074 and gets back to 1074, you get no follow through. It hasn't done that in the past. So honestly, this one's going to be a little more patient. I would like to see this get through 1074, bounce off 1074, and start giving that follow through off 1074. When that happens, this should start developing that, that right side of the base, maybe rip. But out of these main playbook setups, still think Amazon and Palantir are the best. TMDX and Lilly are more, they've been developing a base. They both had that large candlestick on Friday. It might be the start of them developing that right side. And then, yeah, CLS is more of a liquidity grab, to be honest. I wanted to look at a couple 10-300 plays. So remember, 10-300, gaps up by 10%, with over 300% increase in relative volume. That could be from the last 20 days, 50 days. I like doing it from the last 50 days. But TSSI, so notice one, massive volume increase. And then these orange levels are going to be the weekly, the daily high volume high and close. So just something to note for the other charts as well. So yeah, all you look at for this, if it bases over those high volume closes and high volume highs, those are entries. And you have these monthlies. So this one's not as clear as some of the other ones. It's really AXON, Netflix, AAOI. I'm going to take a look at those too. I'll show you. But you're looking for, can this develop a tight base inside or directly under these high volume closes and high volume highs? Ideally 2 to 3 days, maybe even 1 to 2 days is okay. If this just breaks through high volume highs tomorrow, it becomes a little tougher to trade in terms of structure. So yeah, we're looking for that structure though. Let's take a look at DELL. I believe DELL did 10-300 on Friday as well. Yeah, DELL's another one. So DELL's in an interesting spot too. You really get a lot of room if DELL starts pushing over this 150. So again, same concept. If this can give me that 1 to 2 day base, tight range, and then it breaks over that high volume high, it's a great setup. If it just rips, it becomes a little harder, but know that you have a big range if DELL gets going over that. AXON, I have this one highlighted. Yeah, there you go. So this is a perfect example. So maybe ideally I would like to look for a cleaner chart with a little more structure, but that's okay. So what I'm looking at here, 10-300 gap up day, mark up the high volume high, mark up the high volume close. Day 2, closes above the high volume close, tries to test high volume high, can't, but it's nice, tight, and low on volume. Day 3, another inside day in between both of the levels. That's showing you, number one, when price gaps up like that and doesn't go down right away, that should be telling you there's more buyers than sellers. This wants to go higher. Something changed. All right. But these 2 days, this 552 becomes such a clear entry on a breakout. You have, wow, you're looking at a huge range to the upside, 40 points. So stuff like this after the initial 10-300 day is what you're looking for. And these plays have been working. So keep an eye on AXON for that move, that breakout play. Let's look at FIGs. Yeah, this is just a monster move. So FIGs gapped up really largely here, but just didn't give you any, it didn't give you the 10-300 volume, I think, but then it gave you it on earnings. So similar concept. This one's a little tougher because it's almost 2 days. Ideally, you want a little longer base here. You really want this 9 MA to catch up. Once this 9 MA can catch up, this becomes a little more structured. But if this gives you 2-3 days in this tight little range and breaks 1590, you got room to 1655, and then your targets get a little more stretched from there. But this volume that's not even 10-300 volume. This looks like, let me just go. Yeah, this is nearly highest volume ever. You're getting upwards of highest volume ever. So definitely something to note. Entry's lacking, but strength is unbelievable. Netflix is another one. Yeah, Netflix is another one. It gave you 10-300 on Friday, but that's after a multi 3-day, rip. So look for a base. This one might honestly gap up higher the way it's looking, but look for a base. Look for any development or any back test off these high volume closes, high volume highs. That high volume close and high volume high, as long as you see some sort of structure with those and some interaction, these trades become a lot more clear, honestly. This one's interesting. This one's playing into that AI infrastructure theme, and it has every great quality of a stock that wants to rip. And this also looks like close to highest volume ever. I mean, you're talking 64 to 84, massive moves. I think their market cap's like 5 billion. And then when you look at the ranges to the upside, what do we have left? Yeah, we're coming at a really crucial area. The way this thing looks, it looks like it's going to test 103 fairly quickly, and then hopefully develop sort of that cup and handle base on the right side. But just something to note, this looks like a winner. I'll actually probably be doing a little more of a deep dive on this one. Looks like their earnings are turning. Huh. Great 10-300 trade. Any main winner that you find is going to pop up on a 10-300 screener as well. That's why the screener is just so important. So important. And then let's just look at a couple CanSlim names. These are names that are, phenomenal growth numbers, and I just picked out the ones that were moving abnormally. ECPG. I mean, wow, what a push off volume. This wasn't 10-300. Interesting. One to note, beautiful structure. Not sure. I'm going to do a deep dive on all of these, but these ideally are newer growth stocks that I've been looking at. ISSC I've been looking at for some time, but just hasn't. I don't understand it as clearly, but this earnings just continues to follow through. I mean, I've watched them since here now, but these last 2 quarters were phenomenal. Another one getting up to a clear, a major resistance point. And then the last one was CNX. Just kind of want to, nothing really with these last ones, just kind of want to show you guys them. CNX is phenomenal. Wow. All right, never mind. There's a reason I do everything here. This looks phenomenal. I mean, talk about a cup and a handle. This is perfect. Let's just draw this. Man, don't you love when shit is this fucking pretty? Wow. Wow. All right. So couple things, couple ways to play this cup and handle, because I'm gonna look at this 100%. You got two fake outs over that 41.81. This is a similar entry tactic you can use compared to Amazon and Palantir. You know, does this get over 41.81, and then what does it do when it back tests? You know, if it just rips to 44, you can't be mad. You know, stuff just rips and you miss it, you can't be mad. But if this gets over and gives you that back test and holds, or even just gives you that rejection from here and goes back down tomorrow, which would be best, then you could take that breakout. But look for that breakout retest if this just keeps going, you know, tomorrow. But yeah, other than that, we got some good setups. So, you know, just in terms of focus points, Palantir, CLS, TMDX, AXON, Netflix, AAOI, those are all going to be really good winners.